Don't you worry, the clip's about to begin, but don't forget to subscribe. Or else, don't make me turn this website around.
How are you today, Scott? You're on with Andrew and Matt. And Scott's pronouns are listed as they, by the way, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Scott, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing good. I'm
Thanks
good.
for
How are
calling.
you?
Relatively speaking,
I'm good.
I'm good.
Well, that's good to hear.
So what's the question today? It's about morality, I think.
Yes, it's something I've been mulling over for a while and keep going back and forth on. It's is consent a sufficient basis for morality? I know you talk a lot about well-being being the basis that you use, and I keep going back and forth on is consent a subset of well-being that is important, or is it something outside of well-being that is kind of encompassed, that it kind of encompasses? So, did you have a take on that at all? Or?
Yeah, for me, consent is certainly a portion of the well-being. It's not in all of it entirely. So when I talk about well-being, we can immediately look at things that are going to be in the individual's best interest, like individual autonomy. And by the way, as soon as you say individual autonomy, that includes everything that anybody needs to know or cares about consent. That is, that I am sovereign over my body and my life, and that whatever restrictions come have to come for good reason. We don't have absolute freedom. And it may be the case that we do things that you might not consent to. For example, the government requires people to get vaccinated, barring some sort of medical excuse for, through allergies or whatever else. There are concessions that you make as a result of citizenship, and by being born as a citizen of this particular country, you didn't give your consent to this. And so if we were to make just consent the foundation of morality, we would be overlooking some things. Because if it was just about consent, then it would be immoral to lock someone up in jail. Because I'm never going to give you consent to lock me up, no matter what I'm doing. And that's the biggest reason that I would never say that consent is sufficient in and of itself to be a foundation of morality, but it is a function of individual autonomy and well-being.
Okay. Sorry about that. I've thought of that, but I've also thought of it from a different perspective as well. Thinking that there is a consent to take part in an organized structure like a government or a civilization, where, as you know, you consent to the laws in order to gain the protections and that sort of thing. Does that make any sense? So, like,
yes, so this is what we're talking about. Everybody who's a citizen is functionally part of a social contract. A social contract, and you're born into this, and by your continued ability to stay within a particular country. But that, by the way, everything we've been discussing here is not necessarily morality. The examples we're using are about what laws there are, and so it may be that when we talk about consent, when we talk about purely morality and ethics, that consent may be a bigger portion of that. I prefer well-being because it encapsulates that and doesn't fall prey to some of those other things, because I'm not some people would say, oh, Matt's a free speech absolutist. And I'm not. I'm one of the biggest advocates for reasonable free speech that you're going to find, but that doesn't mean that you should be allowed to say anything and everything you want without consequences. By the way, when we talk about censorship, I'm only talking about what the government does, but that's also not a function of morality. The problem with morality and consent is that if I consent to allow you to kill me, cook me, and eat me, does that mean that it becomes moral just because you managed to get consent? Because I can get consent through immoral means of coercion and manipulation and grooming. You talk about children who are raised by individuals who are sick, who need help, such that they are being groomed for a particular role. They will consent to it. Muslim women consent to wear a burqa, but they don't really have the option to not consent in many cases. That's why consent alone isn't right. And that's why what you want is informed, enthusiastic, free from control or undue influence consent. And that is important. On that note, we're running short of time.
I should have specified that.
Yep.
What was that?
I've run short of time. I got to get to one more caller. So I'll give you the option of who's hanging up on whom.
You can hang up on me.
Oh, I love doing that. Thank you so much for the call, Scott. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for checking out this clip for The Line. While you're here, hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and then share this with that bitter uncle of yours who loves talking about the good old days.